this is kind of a smaller story, but I thought this was kind of interesting here. So it's reported that Amazon has spent $2 billion more in 2023 on TV shows and movies and music compared to last year. So last year they spent about $16.6 billion, and this year they spent about $18.9 billion. So that's a 14% increase. What were these costs associated with? So primarily with licensing, which was probably aided by the fact that studios, I can't prove this wasn't reported, but I would imagine the fact, I don't know if you've noticed, but like Warner Brothers and other studios have been putting their stuff on other streaming services. So think Disney, I think, is putting some of their stuff on Netflix, right? I would imagine that decision was informed by just a general malaise of the industry and the kind of shattered dreams of the streaming business. But then also the twin strikes from last year. So there's not as much content, so they need to find alternative revenue streams. So the fact of that, I think, is what has now lended itself to Amazon spending more on licensing. And they've also, some of that, $18.9 billion is also just part of their production costs, right? And that's from Variety. But then we also have from Variety, the CEO of Amazon, Andy Jassy, believing that Prime Video is on its way to being a very sizable and profitable business in its own right, which is going to be interesting, especially if the government forces Amazon to break up all of its assets. Prime Video could stand on its own. But, it recently also, Amazon just introduced ad-supported content, even if you're like a paying subscriber. And that's going to be additional revenue, right? So, with that additional, cash flow, it's clear that Amazon now has more cash to invest in Prime Video and really make it not only a staple of a Prime membership, but just one of the major players in the streaming business, right? And again, this shows an interest in growing the service, whereas other streamers are really trying to tighten the belt here. Once Netflix had its kind of tumble, I can't remember when that was, if it was 2022 or maybe really early 2023, but once Netflix kind of tumbled and had a decrease in subscribers for the first time ever, every company that had a streaming service, their stocks dropped, and they were like, okay, we need to start, like Byron Allen seems to want to do with Paramount Plus. So trim the fat. Okay, this we don't, if we're licensing this, we don't need to. This show, it's not really getting a lot of viewers, so we're just gonna delete it. And there's no physical copies, but no one who gives a shit, according to them. But this kind of shows everyone's zigging and Amazon's zagging, right? And I think Amazon has a really, I think they have a real opportunity here that they've already been doing, and I think they really need to double down on this, and that is, it really needs to become an entertainment hub, right? Their original content and everything is really important, but if you also, you also know that Prime Video is like their subscription service, but then there's also a vast library of film and TV content too, and music, but I'm just focusing here on Prime Video. A whole vast library of content to rent and buy digitally. And that does not, and usually that is not, a select amount of things that are agreed to be licensed. Like, essentially, this is everything you could ever want to rent or buy. What Amazon really needs to do and has been doing is become that entertainment hub where, currently you can get a subscription to certain streaming services, but watch them through Amazon Prime. I'm not sure how the financials work for that. Like, how much, is the subscription more expensive on Prime versus if you just like downloaded that specific streaming service? How does Prime and that other third party, how do they split up that revenue? Because ultimately Prime is hosting the service in a way. So they've already been doing that. I think they really need to lean into that as more and more people get more and more fed up with the fact that there are like 10 different streaming services, and you have to remember all your passwords for all of them, and stuff is moving around all the time. And it's basically just turning into cable. So I think Amazon, and I think Apple also has this opportunity because they similarly have that vast library of content to rent or buy, becoming a place where people can use their other streaming services. You can also get like sports and live TV, which again, they're already kind of doing, but they really need to lean into that. If I was their marketing manager, that's what I would really stress. Is I think that's how you need to pitch this to people. That this is basically can be your one-stop shop for all of your everything you could ever want to watch, right? And though that being said, though, they've been spending all this money last year, but at the same time, they just did a huge amount of layoffs of hundreds of employees last month across, again, these content verticals, right? So at MGM, at Prime Video, at Twitch, at Audible. So they're clearly putting money into it, but is that money always going to places that help the average worker? Probably not. But again, I really do feel like they have this opportunity to really elevate Prime Video. I feel like it's it was really the primary competitor to Netflix. I feel like for a long time, and then Hulu, and then all these other ones eventually came, and because of all these other players now, I feel like Prime has really kind of been downgraded. It's kind of like a B level of streaming service, probably because it doesn't have an incredible originals lineup. It has some hits, but nothing huge, or at least not in the in terms of like the volume. This could be the way they kind of really plant their flag in the sand, so to speak. All right, so why don't